Good afternoon and welcome to the Future of XYZ. This week, July 15th, we have the tremendous honor of hearing from Thomas Droge. Thomas, welcome to Future of XYZ.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. It's nice to get on a screen with you.
It is. It's been too long. So we are going to be speaking on Future of XYZ today about the future of presence. And this is presence, not the kind that come under a Christmas tree or for a birthday, but presence of mind, presence of spirit, presence of body. And Thomas is truly an expert in this universe, if you will. He's an acupuncturist, an herbalist, a teacher, a coach, an author. You hold a master's in Oriental medicine. He's spoken on multiple national TV shows and other things, including with people like Deepak Chopra, and the founder of Pathfinder, who works with both individuals and corporations to help them on the path of presence, really. So, Thomas, again, thanks for joining us. I am going to lob the first question, which is, of course, in your mind's eye, with all of this deep background that you have, what is presence?
Yeah, they're not the things under the tree. It's funny. I like that term. My working definition and the one I most commonly use is as much as is possible for people, a continuous attunement or attention to the present moment, both interiorly and exteriorly. And the concept of mindfulness, or these insight practices that are designed to teach you how to be present or aware, they've come so into the common vernacular that people forget what they really mean, which is the ability to remove the filtration of your projections and your senses to experience the moment in all of its potential. And it's really the in all of its potential piece that is at the kind of driving heart of what I'm usually teaching people.
That's pretty interesting. And how do you teach people this? I mean, you obviously have lots of, I don't know if in the Chinese tradition they're called modalities, but you have so many tools in your toolkit. Can we talk about some of those and your preferred ones?
Yeah, I mean, right now I do most of my work is with leaders and individuals who are trying to actualize a life that's both positive impact in the world and aligned with their kind of greatest gifts and clearest path forward. And to do that, we spend a lot of time sifting through what's keeping them out of the present. And the tools that I use to do that are movement practices from the Chinese tradition. Taiji or Taiji is actually what it's called, and Qi Gong are probably the two biggest movement tools I use. And then different metacognition tools in the form of meditation, but specific. And then a lot of awareness methods to kind of catch themselves and cue themselves into what they're experiencing so they can see it more clearly.
It's interesting. And what is, I mean, I think, you just said, for instance, Taiji, which is something I didn't know, but Qigong, it's all in Western character, right? In the Roman alphabet, Qi is spelled Qi.
Right.
What is Qi to start with? Because Qigong and Taiji, even if it's pronounced differently, are both of Qi.
Yeah, so it's funny, the Qigong, the Qi in Qigong is not the Ji in Taiji. It's not the same. So, I mean, really simply, Taiji, the term, means it's often translated as extreme limit, is what those two words mean. And it's about the exploration of the sort of ends of the spectrum in two different directions and the correlation between them. And if you think of that yin yang diagram, which is actually called the Taiji, that diagram is the expression of these polar opposites. But the place of interest is the line that goes in the center of them where they exchange, because the more those opposites come together, the more you find this integrated exchange between them. And the outer circle represents the wholeness of everything. So the concept of these polar opposite differences, right? This dualistic world. And it has these two places of great unification. One is at the exchange point, like where the ocean meets the shore, you know, which is affecting which is changing which. And then the realization of the whole. And it's a beautiful representation of human consciousness, because for whatever reason in our evolutionary path, our Darwinian survival construct is built on navigating the dual perception of our sensory experience. But we were also gifted with the ability to cognitively understand the interconnected and interdependence and wholeness of everything, even though from our senses, we don't experience it that way. And so we live within a paradox that we're trying to navigate all the time. And the tools of presence are about oscillating between those two states of awareness.
It's kind of, I mean, it's big stuff, right? I mean, and I think this is one of the things that's very interesting about Chinese medicine in particular, is it is by its very nature philosophic. And that is very different, it seems to me, and maybe all religious, if you will, or spiritual practices or explorations are by their very nature philosophic, because there's no something tangible. And yet something about Indian traditions as well, but especially the ancient Chinese traditions and the shamanic traditions, of which perhaps this kind of fits in fact this ability to hold the abstract present. I mean, I hate to say that, but we are talking about the future presence. We don't have to see to believe, we just have to believe. Or I don't know, you can say it better.
I mean, it's funny that you bring it up, because one of my big, I mean, I was and probably am a pretty intense skeptic, although now I would say I'm a healthy skeptic. And before, I think I was like a hypercritical skeptic. But I remember specifically a day where, I was the person who always asked why. And even in Chinese medicine school, people would say things, and I was like, well, can you prove that to me? I needed proof for everything. And I remember specifically one day going through this process, and suddenly my brain, for whatever reason, just flipped. And the sentence, like, it has to be proven to be true, switched to all things that are true are not necessarily provable. And it just opened up the option to explore the unprovable in a new kind of way, not in a naive way, but in a new kind of way. And I think the cosmology that all of these practices of the East, from India to China, were born out of was an agricultural society that had a very different view of the world. And specifically the Chinese, because it's an ideogram-based language, it's my belief anyway, that the nature of ideograms changes based on their contextual relationship in a sentence. And so what can mean mouth here means gate here, means like vastness here. And so the ability for something to mean two different things wasn't foreign to them. They were able to just have that be part of their construct.
That's actually pretty mind-blowing, I have to say, because contextual understanding is really everything, and in all communication. You've obviously spent a good deal of time in China studying and training. I don't know how many decades of training you have under your belt, Thomas, but can we talk a little bit? I mean, you're not someone, yoga is very popular today. yoga has existed for thousands of years. It is not necessarily what is, all about Lululemon and yoga wear, right? This is, it's morphed for sure. And perhaps the practices that you're teaching are not as mainstream yet, but they all require a certain amount of training, education, understanding in order to be able to be a master. And you are in fact a master in Qigong at the very least. So can you talk about that training a little bit and how you've come to this practice and then how you use it to teach presence?
Yeah, I mean, my training started in the 80s. It was a long time ago, I guess, right? And it was I was in Boulder, Colorado, where I met my first teacher, and I was training with Navy SEAL candidates, and our teacher was an ex-Navy SEAL, and it was really very much about martial arts for me back then. And I think I was kind of a disillusioned, angry young man who foolishly thought he knew everything, probably. And at the same time, I was studying poetry in college, which is what my first study was in. And while I was with him, I had an experience. He was also a body worker, and I had an experience with him working on me one day where I went through a whole deep transformative experience, is the only way to say it, where I was on the table, and at some point my whole body started moving on its own and I couldn't really control it. And of course these terms are much more common now, but he was like, oh, you're having a somatic emotional release. And that, in the 80s, like, no one used language like that. And he basically took very gentle care of me, actually put like a big heavy blanket on me and kind of rocked me. And I just went through a pretty intense emotional experience related to my father and moved through it. But it was funny to be in such a kind of vulnerable place with such a masculine guy, and who has such a sort of masculine, like, archetypal warrior structure around him that I was used to. And we went into this experience, but that was sort of the first inkling of the other side of the equation. The sort of flip side of the martial coin is the healing coin. And a lot of the techniques, the technique to set an elbow is just slightly different than the technique to break an elbow. And it's all about your intent, right? So that got me started on that path more clearly. And then, I did 4 years of medicine and 3 years of an apprenticeship, and studied in China for a little while, not that long, and have continued to train with different teachers in Qigong and Taiji continuously for the past, I don't know what that is, 40 years or something like that.
It's really, it's quite remarkable. And what are you seeing? I mean, I joke about the Lululemon trend in yoga wear, but I mean, these ancient tools for mindfulness, for connecting, I guess you would say, kind of the body and mind and spirit, in a world as chaotic as ours increasingly becomes. What is the future of presence in your perspective, and what are the lessons that we as humans or individuals need to learn?
Well, I think we are creatures that are of body and mind as one, right? So within that Taiji diagram, like, if one side's body and one side's mind, it's still inside the circle of our conscious existence, which is, they are directly linked and connected. And the understanding of the relationships between our body mind space and how we operate in the world is our next evolution. And yes, yoga has turned into, many different things in our culture, but I think the one thing that it did was it created a pathway for people to engage more deeply in their own conscious mind and how it's operating and how it's connected to their bodies. And that process has been really valuable. And of course, like, it created a physique that the West really liked. And so it became very popular also, I think, because of that. The beauty of Qigong is that the physical practices aren't that difficult or strenuous physically unless you want them to be, but the benefit happens even when they're not. And what they do is a lot of teaching you how to upregulate and downregulate your nervous system, support your immunity and your blood circulation, and start to map how your conscious and unconscious mind manifest signs in your body, so that you can start to notice a feeling of, a change in your breathing to the top of your chest instead of your belly, that's showing you that your adrenaline's starting to rise, and clearly there's a misalignment between your thinking and your action in the moment. And so you can then address it in real time with inquiry, right? And that's where the process becomes interesting. And I think the other big confusion is that the study of the mind has to be done with the exploration of your mind. And so you can do Qigong or yoga all day long, but if you're not doing, metacognition practices, which are specific meditation practices, you won't actually work that muscle, right? You won't build that awareness. And what I teach people is the process of stepping out of the projection into the future and the memories of the past, and how they're commingling with their senses in the real moment to try and create a neutral place of perception to then see the different options that are potentially in front of them. And that's when it gets really exciting.
Well, and it sounds like a great opportunity. I know you've done a lot of, as you call it, body work, obviously, and herbal work and recommendations and movement work historically with individuals, and you're increasingly moving towards working with leaders and organizations. That seems incredibly valuable. I mean, including in the work that I do as a strategist, right? You're constantly looking ahead at the path to evaluate the options to get from where you are to where you want to go, is how I describe it. And I mean, especially in a business, to be able to calibrate enough to see those options more clearly and kind of understand them sounds incredibly valuable. What are you taking away right now from the fact that there is demand for, let's call it, presence of mind training for organizations and organizational leaders?
Well, I think in the attention economy, right, where our consciousness is really being, let's not use this in a bad way, but effectively manipulated by neuroscience influenced marketing technology and UX design, the ability to know your mind enough to then be able to maximize your time and use your time with real precision and in alignment with what you truly believe and how you want to be in the world is harder. And so the knowledge of your own consciousness becomes a kind of critical tool to wade through the attention economy's constant barrage. And even beyond the attention economy, the information age that we live in, right? So that's where I spend my time with people, is working with how do I deal with all the UX interfaces that run my life.
And they do. I mean, we're all finding our own attention spans so fractured more than ever, no matter what we do. And I think that these practices that bring us to the presence, which is why I think it's so interesting that you opted instead of the future of Qigong, which is what we had discussed, but the future of presence feels very apt for the moment that we're living in, does it not?
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting that you brought up Taiji, because we're in a moment in time as a species where it's kind of critical that we understand ourselves as a whole in order to, manage the planet from a holistic standpoint, right? Like, we can't be isolationists right now. We have to look at the global community on every level. And so the more I see companies and leaders who are taking that into account, not just as like, the necessary, foundational wing of their company, but are actually saying, oh yeah, we really have to have this be part of our overall viewpoint to impact the world in some fashion, is part of how we bring the rest of the world along. Like the leaders, if they're like one of the companies I work with, this fintech company that has 9 or 10 companies in their portfolio, and the founder brings everybody together for weekly Qigong, and the CEOs of those companies are all in the room doing Qigong together. And, he had to do it to bring them into it. Like, but that starts to go out into the group. And now every meeting in all of those companies begins with 90 seconds, which isn't a lot, of meditation before they start any meeting. And it creates a radical difference.
It does. I think it's a radical difference. I've worked in companies, or more. I've counseled and advised companies who do this, and it is profound, the difference that just that presence of mind and a reset, right? A grounding in where we are right now and a connectedness. As we look to close, Thomas, we have a couple minutes left. I just want to inquire. You've talked about it a lot in terms of the Taiji and the symbol of the yin and yang, of this amazing interconnectedness of everything. And I think these Eastern traditions are far more built upon interdependence and interconnectedness. As we think about the future of presence in the world that we're living in, where it's so obvious how interconnected our planet is to human action and animals are to human. I mean, we are all, and as individuals, we are in cultures, we are also interconnected. What would you say in closing is really that that message of presence for helping us kind of actualize, if you will, the interdependence at the next level? Sorry, I just, why
No,
not?
it's a beautiful question. I'm just, in a capitalist society, to say that we should remove personal pronouns from our speech in order to somehow find a way to see the importance and value of all of us is tricky. Like, it's tough to navigate, a capitalist process, which is the one that we live in, and use it correctly, but also understand that we've got to take care of all of us. And so I think to look to the present moment and ask yourself, how am I treating every person I come into contact with throughout my day? Am I treating them with respect, kindness, curiosity, sincerity? Then, okay, I'm probably doing something to spread presence and interconnectedness out into the world.
I like that. That resonates personally quite a lot too. So thank you for that. Well, Thomas, it's really, I mean, I always adore speaking with you. I feel like I slow down.
As I with you.
It's really, it's heaven. And thank you for joining us. Yeah. And thanks for joining us on Future of XYZ. Future of Presence is, it's a big one.
Love it. All right. Have a present day.
Have a present day. The day is the present. And everyone watching and listening, thank you for joining us on Future of XYZ. You can subscribe on YouTube as well as podcasts everywhere. Exactly. Click subscribe, rate how you like it, and also follow us on Future of XYZ on Instagram. Thomas, again, thank you. And everyone, we will see you next week.
Pleasure. Thanks. See you soon.
See you soon.